Preface and Introduction of The Supernatural in Modern English Fiction by Dorothy Scarborough. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ben Tucker. Preface. The subject of the supernatural in modern English fiction has been found difficult to deal with because of its wealth of material. While there has been no previous book on the topic, and none related to it, save Mr. C.E. Whitmore's work on the supernatural and tragedy, the mass of fiction itself introducing ghostly or psychic motifs is simply enormous. It is manifestly impossible to discuss or even to mention all of it. Even in my bibliography, which numbers over 3,000 titles, I have made no effort to list all the available examples of the type. The bibliography, which I at first intended to publish in connection with this volume, is far too voluminous to be included here, so will probably be brought out later by itself. It would have been impossible for me to prosecute the research work or to write the book save for the assistance generously given by many persons. I am indebted to the various officials of the libraries of Columbia University and of New York City, particularly to Miss Isidore Mudge, reference librarian of Columbia, and to the authorities of the New York Society Library for permission to use their priceless out-of-print novels in the Kennedy collection. My interest in English fiction was increased during my attendance on some courses in the history of the English novel, given by Dr. A.J. Carlyle in Oxford University, England, several years ago. I have received helpful bibliographical suggestions from Professor Blanche Colton Williams, Dr. Dorothy Brewster, Professor Nelson Glenn McRae, Professor John Cunliffe, and Dean Talcott Williams of Columbia, and Professor G.L. Kittredge of Harvard. Professors William P. Trent, George Philip Krapp, and Ernest Hunter Wright very kindly read the book in manuscript and gave valuable advice concerning it, Professor Wright going over the material with me in detail, but my chief debt of gratitude is to Professor Ashley H. Thorndike, head of the Department of English and Comparative Literature in Columbia, whose stimulating criticism and kindly encouragement have made the book possible. To all of these, and others who have aided me, I am deeply grateful, and I only wish that the published volume were more worthy of their assistance. Introduction. The supernatural is an ever-present force in literature. It colors our poetry, shapes our epics and dramas, and fashions our prose till we are so wonted to it that we lose sense of its wonder and magic. If all the elements of the unearthly were removed from our books, how shrunken in value would seem the residue, how forlorn our feelings. Lafcadio Hearn, in the recently published volume Interpretations of Literature, says, "There is scarcely any great author in European literature, old or new, who has not distinguished himself in his treatment of the supernatural. In English literature, I believe there is no exception from the time of the Anglo-Saxon poets to Shakespeare, and from Shakespeare to our own day. And this introduces us to the consideration of a general and remarkable fact, a fact that I do not remember to have seen in any books, but which is of very great philosophical importance. There is something ghostly in all great art, whether of literature, music, sculpture, or architecture. It touches something within us that relates to infinity. This continuing presence of the weird in literature shows the popular demand for it, and must have some basis in human psychosis. The night side of the soul attracts us all. The spirit feeds on mystery. It lives not by fact alone, but by the unknowable, and there is no highest mystery without the supernatural. Man loves the frozen touch of fear, and realizes pure terror only when touched by the unmortal. The hint of spectral sounds or presences quickens the imagination as no other suggestion can do, and no human shapes of fear can awe the soul as those from beyond the grave. Man's varying moods create heaven, hell, and fairy wonderlands for him, and people them with strange beings. Man loves the supernatural elements in literature perhaps because they dignify him by giving his existence a feeling of infinity otherwise denied. They grant him a sense of being the center of powers more than earthly, of conflicts supermortal. His own material life may be, however, circumscribed and trivial, yet he can loose his fancy and escape the petty tragedies of his days by flight beyond the stars. He can widen the tents of his mortal life, create a universe for his companionship, and marshal the forces of demons and unknown gods for his commands. To his narrow rut he can join the unspaced firmament. To his trivial hours add eternity. To his finite, infinity. He is so greedy of power, and has so piteously little, that he must look for his larger life in dreams, and in the literature of the supernatural. But whatever be the reasons, There has been a continuity of the ghostly in literature, with certain rise and fall of interest. There is in modern English fiction, as likewise in poetry and the drama, a great extent of the supernatural, with wide diversity of elements, beginning with the Gothic romance, that curious architectural excrescence that yet has had enormous influence on our novel. The supernatural is found in every period, and in every form of fiction. The unearthly beings meet us in all guises, and answer our every mood, whether it be serious or odd, satiric or humoresque. Literature, always a little ahead of life, has formed our beliefs for us, made us free with spirits, and given us entrance to immortal countries. The sense of the unearthly is ever with us, even in the most commonplace situations, and there is nothing so natural to us as the supernatural. Our imagination, colored by our reading, reveals and transforms the world we live in. We are aware of unbodied emotions about us, of discarnate moods that mock or invite us. We go a-ghosting now in public places, and a spectre may glide up to give us an apologia pro vita sua any day in Grand Central or on Main Street of our town. We chat with fetches across the garden fence, and pass the time of day with demons by way of the dumbwaiter. That gray-furred creature that glooms suddenly before us in the winter street is not a chauffeur, but a werewolf questing for his prey. Yon whirring thing in the far blue is not an aeroplane, but a hippogriff that will presently alight on the pavement beside us, with thundering golden hoofs to bear us away to distant, lovely lands, where we shall be untroubled by the price of butter, or the articles lost in last week's wash. That sedate middle-aged ferry that transports us from Staten Island is a magic sending boat if only we knew its potent runes. The old woman with the 2 pink cheeks and glittering eye that presses August bargains upon us with the argument that they will be in style for early fall wear is a witch, wishful to lure away our souls. We may pass at will by the guardian of the narrow gate, and traverse the regions of the underworld. True, the materialist may argue that the actual is more marvelous than the imagined, that the aeroplane is more a thing of wonder than was the hippogriff, that the ferry is really the enchanted boat after all, and that Dante would write a new Inferno if he could see the subway at rush hour. But that is another issue. We might have more psychical experiences than we do if we would only keep our eyes open, but most of us do have more than we admit to the neighbors. We have an early Victorian reticence concerning ghostly things, as if it were scandalous to be associated with them. But that is all wrong. We should be proud of being singled out for spectral confidences, and should report our ghost guests to the society columns of the newspaper. It is hoped that this discussion of comparative ghost lore may help to establish a better sense of values. In this book, I deal with ghosts and devils by and large in an impressionistic way. I don't know much about them. I have no learned theories of causation. I only love them. I only marvel at their infinite variety, and am touched by their humanity, their likeness to mortals. I am fond of them all, even the dejected, dog-eared ghosts that looked as if they were wraiths of poor relations left out in the rain all night, or devils whose own mothers wouldn't care for them. It gives me no holier-than-thou feeling of horror to sit beside a vampire in the subway, no panic to hear a banshee shut up in a hurdy-gurdy box. I give a cordial how-do-you-do when a dragon glides up and puts his paw in mine, and in every stray dog I recognize a gladsome beast. Like us mortals, they all need sympathy, none more so than the poor wizards and bogles that are on their own, as the Scotch say. While discussing the 19th century as a whole, I have devoted more attention to the fiction of the supernatural in the last 30 years or so, because there have been much more of it in that time than before. There is now more interest in the occult, more literature produced dealing with psychical powers than ever before in our history. It is apparent in poetry, in the drama, the novel, and the short story. I have not attempted, even in my bibliography, to include all the fiction of the type, since that would be manifestly impossible. I have, however, mentioned specimens of the various forms, and have listed the more important examples. The treatment here is meant to be suggestive rather than exhaustive, and seeks to show that there is a genuine revival of wonder in our time, with certain changes in the characterization of supernatural beings. It includes not only the themes that are strictly supernatural, but also those which, formerly considered unearthly, carry on the traditions of the magical. Much of our material of the weird has been rationalized, yet without losing its effect of wonder for us in fact or in fiction. If now we study a science where once men believed blindly in a black art, is the result really less mysterious? End of preface and introduction.